Israel Fact and Fiction, lesson number 2. So last week we talked about our claim to the land. And we talked about why we should even be in this land. And we explained that Jewish land is not just a place for Jewish people to live, but Jewish land is, as it says, a Jewish land, meaning a land that's according to the Jewish laws, to the Jewish traditions, to the way the Torah tells a Jew to live. This affects our social life, our economic life, our agricultural life, and for our discussion today, it also affects our military life. Yes, the Torah has much that it talks about, put this down so you can see me, regarding the military, how soldiers are supposed to act, how you're supposed, what is the right approach when it comes to battle, what is the right approach when it comes to dealing with others, with other nations, with other people. This is a central aspect of having a land. And this also, for those who claim, why do you need an army? And does Israel even need an army? And maybe we should just believe in God. Well, the Torah tells us very clearly. The Torah tells us laws about having an army. And the Torah, right away, when the Torah counts, the Jewish people, it's the from 20 to 60, which is the age that you could go to battle. They say in 1948 there were two Jews discussing the best way to build up the lines of Israel. And one says we should attack the United States because they will destroy us, and later they'll have to come and rebuild us because that's always what they do. And the other one says, yeah, that's a good idea, but the problem is what happens if we win. So, my friends, this is where we're at, and we're going to discuss a very sensitive topic and a very controversial topic. The idea of land for peace and the viability of land for peace, and can a two-state solution work? And I want to tell you, this entire class came about when a few individuals had asked me about what is the best approach. And there's a lot of discussion today of the day after. What happens in the day after? What should Israel do? And the answer should not depend on what a few politicians sitting in the Knesset say should happen. What should happen is based, as we'll see, on what is the best viable option for Israel. Not on what other countries say, not on what the UN says, but on what is the best option for Israel. Now, what is that we're going to discuss? But to understand this, we have to first go back to what we talked about last week. And I said that there's going to be a big difference when we talk about the story of Israel between what happened before the Six-Day War in 1967 and what happened after the Six-Day War. Because you see, all this orange here is what Israel acquired after the Six-Day War in 1967. Before that, this was Israel, this strip here. Now, this is what we call the West Bank. This is the Golan Heights. This is Gaza, of course, and the Sinai. And this is what's referred to today by some as the disputed territories. And this is where it's become a constant issue back and forth, which really began then. So to understand that, I'm first going to show a video about the Six-Day War, which is going to give a perspective to understand what happened and how that affects this very day, till today. What's going on in Gaza today is affected by what took place then.
1967. Israel was besieged by three brutal enemies and had to fight them all at once: Egypt, Jordan, Syria. At stake was the survival of a nation, the life of every Jewish citizen of Israel. The greatest threat came from Egypt, where the match was horribly lopsided. Egypt deployed 100,000 troops in the Sinai Peninsula, while Israel had mobilized 45,000. In machinery and firepower as well, the numbers were heavily unbalanced in Egypt's favor. On June 5th, at 7:14 a.m., Israel's Air Force executed a preemptive attack, striking hard in Egypt's own territory. In 2 furious hours, Egypt's Air Force virtually ceased to exist, and its airfields were rendered unusable. But Israel could not rely on an aerial attack alone. Just 15 minutes after her fighter jets roared into action, her ground forces confronted the enormous armored enemy that menaced the Sinai. Israel divided its attack force into 3 divisions. All faced heavy tank battles against exceptional odds. The 1st Division, led by Major General Israel Tau, fought its way to El Arish, the fortified capital of the Sinai Peninsula, along the banks of the Mediterranean. By the next morning, June 6th, El Arish was in Israeli hands. Its last guns fell silent the following night, and neighboring Gaza was conquered that same day. Meanwhile, a 2nd Division, led by Ariel Sharon, headed for the strategic northern junction of Abu Agila. Sharon confused his entrenched enemy by attacking at night from multiple directions. By mid-morning on June 6th, Sharon had secured all strategic areas. A 3rd Reserve Division, led by Brigadier General Abraham Yoav, split in 2. One half silently penetrated Wadi Hirdi, an undefended natural barrier that Egypt considered impassable. This aided Sharon by preventing enemy reinforcements from joining the battles raging in Rafah and Abu Agila. The other half joined General Tau in a pincer attack against the key high ground at Jebel Libni, where the Egyptians maintained control of their 2nd, deeper defense line. By the evening of June 6th, the high grounds had fallen. The afternoon of June 6th found the Egyptian military elite in panic, issuing contradictory orders and abandoning their troops to disorderly retreat. 2 IDF divisions raced to the Suez Canal. Their mission was to block off the Egyptian retreat, allowing the 3rd Division to drive the escaping enemy into a trap and preventing any chance of regrouping. On June 7th, Israel's paratrooper unit arrived in abandoned Sharm el-Sheikh on the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. On June 8th, IDF forces reached the Suez Canal. By June 9th, the entirety of Sinai and Gaza was in Israeli hands. Egypt had lost its air force and its army, and had been soundly defeated. It promptly signed a ceasefire. The Sinai, however, was not Israel's only front. On the first morning of war, June 5th, as Egypt's airfield lay smothering, and with its Sinai forces under heavy attack, Egypt lied to Jordan by claiming false victories over Israel. Egypt ordered its ally to attack Israel. At precisely 9 a.m. on the 5th of June, Jordanian planes and artillery bombarded Israeli positions and airfields, and unleashed an inferno against the unprotected civilians of Jerusalem. Israel appealed for Jordan to stay its hand. General Ahmed Bull of the UN's peacekeeping force relayed a message from Israeli Prime Minister Eshkol to Jordan's King Hussein. We are engaged in defensive fighting on the Egyptian sector, and we shall not engage ourselves in any action against Jordan unless Jordan attacks us. Should Jordan attack Israel, we shall go against her with all our might, and the king will have to bear the full responsibility of the consequences. But at 11 a.m., King Hussein formally rejected Israel's overtures. His reply was blunt. It is too late. The die has been cast. By 12:30, Jordanian shelling shrieked to the tune of a full-blown assault, causing multiple deaths, almost 1,000 wounded, and a trail of destruction. Once again, Israeli jets tore through the skies, rapidly demolishing the entire Jordanian Air Force, allowing Israel's ground forces to capture key border positions, such as the Kalkilia Junction and Latroun stronghold. After this punishment, Israel waited for the heavily bruised Jordan to reconsider, to no avail. Left with no choice, on June 6th, the IDF met the Jordanian army head-on in the West Bank. The struggle to rescue Jerusalem was bitter and costly, but after 2 days of close combat, Israel captured the Old City. Outside of Jerusalem, the bloodiest battle was the Battle of the Dotan Valley. Israel intended a limited struggle to neutralize long-range artillery fire near Jenin, but the war was unintentionally expanded as the battle spread across Judea and Samaria. On the morning of June 7th, Israeli forces arrived at the Samaritan city of Shechem, or Nablus. Its residents mistook the IDF for Iraqi troops and welcomed them, but soon realized their error and resisted bitterly until the city fell later that night. East Jerusalem and the rest of the West Bank fell with little resistance on June 7th. Israel captured Jericho, the Jordan Valley, the Gush Etzion area, and the Judean cities of Ramallah, Bethlehem, Hebron, Tul-Karen, and Kalkilia. Jordan had suffered a crushing defeat. At 8 p.m. on June 7th, Jordan signed a ceasefire. Israel now controlled the densely populated West Bank, although many locals had fled to Jordan ahead of the Israeli advance. Beside Egypt and Jordan, Israel faced one other major menace: Syria. The Golan mountain range was under Syrian control and heavily fortified, turning Israel's into sitting ducks. On the first day of war, Syria's Air Force had attacked Israel, which responded by eliminating its enemy's Air Force. The following day, June 6th, a Syrian ground invasion of Israel was repelled. Licking its wounds, Syria spent the next 2 days raining destruction on Israeli villages from atop the Golan Heights. Israel bled but could not respond. They were up to their necks in the effective destruction of Egypt and Jordan's armed forces. But when those enemies signed ceasefires, Israel turned a sharp eye to the Syrian bombardment of its northern civilians. Years of sporadic shelling have been a primary instigator of this war, and Israel could not sheathe its sword before pointing its blade at Damascus. On June 9th, Major General David Elazar was ordered to storm the Golan. It was literally an uphill battle, to a plateau some 2,000 feet in the air. The mountain bristled with heavy fortifications, minefields, and trenches. After Israel's Air Force shook the mountainside for 3 hours, its ground forces inched painfully upwards from 5 locations in the northern Hula Valley, exposed to enemy fire all the way. The main attack was towards the town of Kala, where Syrian defenses were weaker due to the impenetrability of the steep cliffs. Sappers cleared mines. Then bulldozers created roads. Then tanks clambered up in single file, accompanied by troops. The invasion took several hours at the tragic cost of heavy casualties, but the strongholds of Kala, Tel Azizat, Tel Fakir, Dardara, and Tel Halel were taken. On the morning of the 10th, Israel captured Banias and Mansara, leaving their path clear to Kenitra, the regional capital and center of Syrian military command, which fell without a fight. In just 1 day of terrible fighting, the strategically crucial Golan Heights was in Israeli hands, removing the nearly 20-year-long threat that towered over northern Israel. With the elimination of the Syrian, Jordanian, and Egyptian threat in just 6 days, Israel not only survived, but tripled in size. The war was won.
Now, yes, we're clapping, and there's a lot to clap about. But the problem is what happened after that. Now, Israel had a problem on their hands, to be fair. How are we going to deal with all of these Arab communities, which they now have under their control. That's problem number one. Problem number two is that, of course, the UN and the rest of the world is blaming Israel for taking land that doesn't belong to them, which is what they have till today. So, because of this, many questions came about. And that is where the suggestion of the two-state solution started to pop up. So the official position of the current Israeli government until October 7th, I don't think they've come up with anything since October 7th, was that they do want to have a two-state solution, which means that they're going to take all of the Arab lands, the Arab communities, and say, here, this is yours, and we're going to be Israel the way we were. But the question of how much Israeli territory should surrender, that's one question. Should there be any preconditions? And obviously this is something that many presidents had tried to encourage Israel to do. Today I'm not here to tell you what any political view on the matter should be, and I assume that's not the reason that you came. You came to see what is the proper Torah perspective and what is the Jewish perspective on this matter. And that is what we're here to talk about today. So, a two-state solution would mean withdrawal from the territories. Now you know when we talk about the territories, when you hear that term, that's referring to the land that was captured at the Six-Day War. This is why this is so important. When we talk about the West Bank until the 6 Day War was not in Jewish hands. Shortly afterwards, it started becoming. When it started becoming, the Jewish people actually started to settle. The Israeli government, for example, didn't want Jews to start living in Hebron, which was in the West Bank. Jews went there forcibly, and they just they were literally squatters there until they got permission to live there. Part of Jerusalem was considered part of the West Bank. And of course, Gaza is also part of the discussion because that was also what they captured together with the Sinai. And then you have the Golan Heights, which has also been a discussion which nothing much has happened since then. So, I'm going to get to this in a second. Wait, sorry. I had some. Thought it. Okay, actually. So before we talk about what actually happened in Israel, let's first take a look at the discussion of what the Torah says on the matter. But let me ask you, just for discussion's sake, can you give me 3 reasons to create a Palestinian state? Anyone? That there should be created a Palestinian state. It would be peace, okay?
Nobody else wants the Palestinians.
Okay, that they have nowhere else to go, all right?
Because they have been living there for
They've been living there for many years. Okay. Why should they not allow it? Give me 3 reasons. Yeah?
Land taken in battle belongs to the victor.
That belongs to the victor. Okay. What else?
You can't get them all.
Huh?
They can't be trusted.
You can't be trusted, okay? Obviously this discussion after October 7th is a little more clear, but any other?
They have rejected numerous plans to give them that land.
They have rejected it themselves. Okay, very good. Now let me ask you another question. Would there be a difference if I would say to give away Jerusalem or I would say to give away Gaza, let's say? Yes? No. Some say no, some say yes. Okay. This is a quote from the book of Numbers. V'arashtem ha'aretz v'shaftem. You have it in your booklet. It's text number 2.8 for those who have the booklet. It's towards the end of the booklet. Today's lessons is at the end of the booklet. Text 2a. For those who don't have it, I have it up on the board.
It's after 45. It's after page 45.
After page 45, thank you. You shall vacate the land of its inhabitants and settle in it, for I have given the land to you to inherit. So God says, in other words, this is not just to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is a command to the Jewish people, saying that you shall vacate the land of its inhabitants and settle the land, and you shall inherit the land. So you're shaking your head and saying, well, of course, that means we got to have the land. Okay, so why are you living here?
I was born here, that's why.
Okay. And why? And so why were you born here? Because your parents were and their parents were.
Right.
Well, let's see. Says the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, we have been commanded to take possession of the land that God gave to our forefathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and not to leave the land in the hands of any other nation or allow it to remain unpopulated. Thus God instructed the children of Israel, you shall vacate the land of its inhabitants and settle in it, for I have given the land to you to inherit. The sages greatly extolled the importance of the mitzvah of dwelling in the land. On top of their many Jewish lavish praises, they went so far to say, whoever leaves the land and dwells in the diaspora is analogous to an idol worshiper. It is my contention that all this praise is due to the biblical commandment to take possession of the land and dwell in it. The commandment applied to all generations, and every one of us is obligated to fulfill it, even in times of exile. So the Ramban by Moshe ben Nachman is very, very clear. This is a mitzvah that is relevant even today, in all times, even in times of exile. There is a biblical command to inherit the land, to live in the land. And many people who live in the land of Israel today will say that they follow the opinion of the Ramban. And not only that, he goes as far to say, as the Talmud says, someone who lives out of Israel is analogous to an idol worshiper. And he's very clear that it is a mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. Now, this is not the opinion of everyone. Some say that it's not necessarily applicable all times. And it's not necessarily a mitzvah which was given to all generations. That may have been a mitzvah that was given just to the generation that went into the land of Israel. According to the Ramban, any part of the land of Israel that a Jew is living there, he's fulfilling a mitzvah. Reb Shlomo Duran, known as the Rashbash, says, undoubtedly to dwell in the land of Israel is a great mitzvah. This is true in all generations, whether or not the holy temple is standing in Jerusalem. My grandfather Nachmanides lists this mitzvah among the 613 biblical commandments, citing the verse, you shall vacate the land of its inhabitants and settle in it. However, this obligation does not lie collectively upon the exiled nation of Israel. In fact, while the collective is enjoined from fulfilling the mitzvah, currently the mitzvah is incumbent upon the individual. Every individual is urged to go and dwell in the land. So the Rashbash, who was a grandchild of the Ramban, says it's true that it's a mitzvah, it's a commandment, as his father says, to live in the land of Israel. However, he says it's not a collective commandment when we're in the time of exile. Rather, it is a mitzvah that is incumbent on the individual. The individual has to fulfill that mitzvah. So according to this, the conquering the land is not obligatory today. According to the first opinion, it's obligatory to conquer the land because we have to live there. According to this, it's not necessarily a mitzvah to conquer the land today because that is something that is for an individual who is responsible for it to take up residence in the land. However, it doesn't mean that it's something that is completely irrelevant today. Some argue that while there may not be a mitzvah to actually go out and conquer the land, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you could give away land that you have. Once you have conquered it, you have to keep that for generations. So, therefore, some contemporary halachic authorities say that giving up land is actually a biblical precept, and according to Jewish law, according to the Torah itself, biblically you would not be allowed to. Now, on the other side of that, we have the Rambam, Maimonides, who says that there's an obligation to conquer and dwell the land, but that was applicable only in the times of in the times when there was a temple standing. Number 2, he says, you shall vacate the land and settle in it. Okay, which means that it was for that generation that entered the land to conquer it and dwell in it, but it's not a directive for generations to come. And he says that it's not even a commandment, but it is a counsel, meaning saying that this is the best way to go about it is to conquer the land. So there are different halachic opinions as to conquering the land. Why this is important? As I said before, because if you are of the opinion that it's a mitzvah to conquer the land and dwell in it, then it's pretty clear that that also means that you can't give up any land. But as we see, it's not something that everyone holds of. There is another aspect here. Which some may argue. The importance of gratitude. And this you see in text number 5. Do you have text number 5 on there? No. Which is gratitude, a Jew is called in Hebrew what? Yehudi, right? Jew. The word Jew is a translation of Judah. Judah comes from the word Yehuda. Yehuda is Yehudi, a Jew. So the idea of a Jew means to be thankful. And many might say, look, God gave us such a great miracle. Look at what happened in the Six-Day War. Look at what happened in the battles in 1948, 1956, every battle. But especially what we just watched with the Six-Day War. God gave us this as a gift. I mean, to conquer that amount of land against so many nations coming after you, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, everyone coming at you at once. And in 6 days to completely abolish them, the amount of miracles that took place there. We like to say Israel is a great army. That's true. But physically, it's impossible to really explain it. And so clearly this is a gift that God gave. So can we say that you could give away something that is a gift that God has given to us? So this is another aspect, the idea of gratitude. Now, according to the Ramban, as we said, settling the land is a biblical command. According to the Ramban, it is not a biblical command. So let's go through this again. So when it says you shall vacate the land and settle in it, according to Nachmanides, this means that you actually have to conquer the land. That being said, not necessarily doesn't mean that you have to conquer the land in exile. And when it says to live in it, doesn't mean in exile that you have to live in it as well. So this is according to this. As we said, it may be just an individual duty to live there, but not necessarily to return and to settle the land that's already in our possession. Now, as we said, Rambam Maimonides does not include this. As he said, it's not applicable in exile to live in Israel. It was only specifically for the generation entering the land and it was only a counsel, not a command, telling them to conquer it, because that way you could live in peace. Now, so it's important to understand that when we talk about living in the land of Israel, that there are different opinions as to what is the actual command of living in Israel. Now here's another verse. The Torah says, when God brings you into the land, do not make a covenant with them, nor be gracious to them, which is explained that you shall not let them settle. Some say this means that it's referring to idolaters, and it's not applicable to monotheists, in other words, those who want to accept the Jewish tradition. We said a Yehudi, that's another aspect. Yehudi means a Jew. You have to be gracious, you have to be thankful, and therefore it's important to recognize that it's a gift that God gave us. At the same time, we have to remember that Torah is a way of peace. Torah is not looking for wars. Torah is not looking for battle. God is not telling us that we have to go and fight. That's not our ways. That's not what we look to do. The ways of Torah are sweet in the past, are peaceful, like we say when we take out the Torah. The Maimonides says in text 6, in the interest of maintaining peaceful relations, let me go back here because I have it on the board as well. In the interest of maintaining peaceful relations, our sages instructed us to visit non-Jewish sick, bury their dead, and give charity to the poor, just as we do for our fellow Jews. The imperative is to be kind to non-Jews is based on the scriptures. For it is written, God is good to all, and his compassion extends to all his creations. It is written, the ways of Torah are sweet, and all her paths are peaceful. And so it's important to note, someone mentioned to me before about people saying comments about Muslims, and it's, as Jewish people, we don't have an issue with Muslims or any other type of religion. We do have an issue of those who attack us. We do have an issue of those who do not allow us to live peacefully in our land. But, take a look at what's happening today in Dubai or other countries where they're very friendly and peaceful, and you have to be good to them, and you have to take care of them. And so this is part of who we are. This teaches the laws of Torah are not vengeful, rather bring compassion, kindness, and peace to the world. As for those heretics who say that administering a life-saving treatment constitutes a forbidden violation of the Shabbat, one may apply to them the verse, I gave them harmful statutes and laws by which they cannot live. Okay, so now we're saying that you have to live. So even though you have to be kind, but you also have to live, and you have to make sure that you are living properly, and that means, even if it means to violate the laws, you do so. And therefore, in theory, text number 8, do you have text number 8 in your book? No. There are those that say that in theory, if we knew that by giving up the land, that would actually bring peace, as you mentioned before, then many would say that you should actually do that. The question is if it actually works. Now, if I was having this conversation before October 7th, it would probably be a different conversation. But nevertheless, it's important to have this conversation because, again, this is going to be coming up. So, number one, notice that we are a grateful nation and we are a peaceful nation. Now, with all these different sides coming up and with all that we have, this is ultimately what our question is. When we talk about ceding or retaining land, the question is, will it put lives at risk? And how concerned do we have to be about everyone else? And so for this, I'm going to turn you to the timeline of Land for Peace efforts, and let's see what actually happened historically. And then we're going to come back to where we are today. Everyone following me so far? Is everyone too cold? Should I ask Connie to put on the heat? I can't, I don't know, I have to find the remote for that. It may be right behind you, I don't know. If it's cold, it's not because of that fan. Anyway. If it's cold, we can turn the heat on. How many people say we should turn the heat on? All right, well, it's on that side. Okay. So, last week, as you see on the list here, most of it you can't read, but I'm going to go through the important ones. I'm going to go to the bottom left. In June 19th, 1967, the Israeli cabinet determines the conditions for giving back territories. The final document reads, Israel is offering to make peace with Egypt based on international borders and the security requirements of Israel. It's very important to notice what this says here. It says Israel is offering to make peace with Egypt. In the beginning, nobody asked Israel to do that. They offered. Now, they did have this issue of all these other communities. It was an issue, but that was problem number one. Now, as you see, in April 11th, 1968, a group of Jews celebrate Passover Seder in Hebron and refuse to leave. And that's when the settlement of Kiryat Arba comes about. On July 17, 1968, the PLO charter is amended. What does PLO stand for? Very good. Palestinian liberation, many people don't even know that it exists because now we have a new term called Hamas. But it started off as the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation. So, at this time, November 22nd, 1968, the UN Security Council resolution demands withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories occupied in the recent conflict, right? So this is 1968. So this is just a year and a half after the Six-Day War. Now, a very important one. May 1973, the settlement of Katif is established in the first 21 Gush Katif settlements in Gaza. 1973. In 1973, September, Israeli government approves building plans for the city of Yamit in, where's that? Northern Sinai Peninsula. Yes, there was a Jewish community in the Sinai. In 1974, Gush Emunim movement is formed to promote Jewish settlement in the West Bank. And then came 1977. And discussions began in 1977, and finally in 1979, this happened. Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, Egyptian Prime Minister Anwar Sadat, and U.S. President Jimmy Carter. They came together. By the way, you know who was the most angry about this deal? The Egyptians were. They did not like it. Anyway, what was the deal here? The withdrawal from the Sinai. Now think about that. The Sinai was larger than Israel itself. And in 1979, they gave all that back. Now, there are many that will argue that since then, we haven't had any problems from Egypt. There are many that will argue that. There are many that will argue, why do we even need the Sinai? It's not even part of biblical Israel. There are many that will argue that it's very important for the Israel economy. You have oil there. We're literally giving our enemies oil so that we could buy it back from them. But this was the first thing that they did, was they gave back the Sinai. And that, since then, has been a non-starter discussion. It's been out of Israel's hands. And I think it's very clear that what happened at that point is something very interesting. I'm not going to show you on the map. But just a question. They gave back the Sinai to Egypt. What was attached to the Sinai? Gaza. Why didn't they give back the Gaza? So there are many that claim that Egypt did not want Gaza. Yes, this is true.
And Egypt doesn't want to let the people of Gaza into the Sinai.
And they don't want to let them into the Sinai. And so, even though it was attached to the Sinai, that was not part of the deal, Gaza. Now, some may argue that no, it's because there were already Jewish settlements in Gaza. Some can argue that that's also part of it, why maybe Israel did not want to give it, because there are already Jewish settlements in Gaza. But regardless, even though Gaza was captured together with the Sinai, it was not returned together with the Sinai. So that's something important to recognize. Then, in the 1990s, you had the Intifada. And so the town of Yamit was then evacuated in 1982. Now, then came, now at the time, the PLO, who was now operating out of different locations, out of some locations in Jordan until Black September, which I'm not going to go into now, which basically Jordan kicked them out. Eventually they ended up going to Lebanon. As we'll see, they ended up in Lebanon. Israel went to battle in Lebanon in 1982. We're going to see a video about that at the end of the class. Very important battle. And then instead of finishing off, they were exiled to Tunisia. Right? Who said Tunisia? Very good. To Tunisia. Tunis. And eventually they came back in 1990s, and they began to they began living in the West Bank or whatever. And then, to make a long story short, this happened in 1993, the Oslo Accords. It says Yitzhak Rabin, Yasser Arafat, who was the leader of the PLO, and President Bill Clinton. Okay, this was another very, very important aspect. Now that is when the Intifada started, which is the Intifada is when they started blowing up buses, blowing up, there was a famous restaurant, pizza shop that was blown up, people, Sbarro's, there were people being killed in the streets. And this went on for about 2 decades of this constant fighting back and forth. This happened primarily after, it wasn't only after the Oslo, but it really started majorly after the Oslo Accord. So you have to understand that a lot of the suffering that we had from the terrorists happened once the peace deal happened, because they said, Intifada, we have to take over the whole Israel. So now we're getting here. Now, remember, Yasser Arafat was exiled to Tunisia. Israel allowed him to come back in. So now he's shaking hands with the leader of a terrorist organization, the PLO. And this had caused a lot of upheaval in Israel. It's sad to say that in November 4th, 1995, Yigal Amir assassinated Yitzhak Rabin, which was a big tragedy for the Jewish people. To be killing our own people is worse than anything else. But anyway, then finally, this is going on for about 2 decades. This constant terror. So Israel is looking for a solution. So what do? Finally, in 2005, after more attacks and suicide attacks, and without going into all the details, in 2005, Israel unilaterally disengages from Gaza. And this is perhaps the most important of what's relevant to us today. These are pictures from those disengagements. They tell a lot. This is a Jewish so-called settler These were very, very big towns, by the way. They weren't settlements. There were probably over 100,000 Jews living there. There were 25 Jewish settlements. This is a bulldozer destroying probably a synagogue or a house. This is them carrying out a menorah. And to be clear, it's the Israeli government that disengaged these people. They forced them out. These pictures are very, very telling. You can see on the faces of the soldiers that they don't want to do what they're doing. Right? Just look at the faces of those soldiers. Look at the face of the soldier. He's holding onto his fellow Jew. This is, in my opinion, one of the most tragic things that happened in the last century. You can see on the face of the soldiers, again, look, the soldiers are saying, we're with you, but we have to do our job. And this is what they did. By the way, I want to take you back to Gaza in 1994. That little guy, that's me. That's in Gush Katif. We mentioned Gush Katif, this is Gush Katif. This one on the right, that's me, my two brothers. I had visited Gaza in 1994. Gush Katif, you can see the Israeli flag there. And these are two soldiers standing guard. Now, there were a lot of attacks in Gaza, constantly. People would drive on the road and constantly be attacked. And it was at that point that the Israeli government finally said, we have to do something. But clearly, what they did was wrong. And there's no one that could disagree with this because this happened on October 7th in 2023. And that's aside for the ongoing battles and the constant shelling of rockets that have been going on since then. So, finally, Israel said, let's take back Gaza. By the way, I don't have it on here, but there were some pictures of soldiers who left Gaza as little boys. And they went back and they saw where their house was when they had left. Gaza also had a very strong economy. They were big exporters of what? Flowers, of lettuce, of all kinds of vegetation. But that was all destroyed the second it was given back. We're going to get to what the Rebbe says. I'm going to get to that. But first let's talk about some other things. So, this is ultimately the questions that come up. So, number one, we had the withdrawal from Sinai. And that obviously had a very, very great impact in everything that took place. Then we had, in 2005, perhaps what was most effective to what happened on October 7th was 2005, completely leaving Gaza wide open. And then there were constant battles in 2014, Operation Protective Edge. And then, we're not going to go into UN condemning Israel. That's a whole other discussion beyond today's concept and beyond today's discussion. And, with all the anti-Semitism and everything, which is, you clearly see that you could appease them as much as you want, and it doesn't work. You could say, we're ready to take away all our communities. But as they say today, from the river to the sea. And so, the question now becomes, what is the approach again from the Torah perspective? And for this we have to go to text number 7. Not number 7, I'm sorry. Text number 9. You don't have 9? Okay, fine. No problem. I'm not getting to 19 yet. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought that I had put more on there, but okay. So ultimately, well, the question is, when it comes to matters of life and death, we always override all laws of the Torah. Pikuach nefesh. Pikuach nefesh is, which means saving one's life, overrides all aspects of the Torah. And this is true about everything. If somebody has to eat on Yom Kippur, if it's a life and death situation, you eat on Yom Kippur. If you have to violate Shabbos, you violate Shabbos. I have a brother-in-law, he works for Hatzalah in New York, which is a volunteer ambulance corps. And he carries a phone and a radio with him on Shabbos, and he drives, if necessary, if he gets a call. Because everything overrides life and death matters. Pikuach nefesh. So, with that being said, in theory, if these occupied territories, so-called occupied territories, if we were to give them back, if Israel would be a full peace and no one's ever going to be harmed, we say, by all means. And with that would be no difference between whether or not this is the Gaza or it's the old city of Jerusalem. Because as much as it's important to occupy the land of Israel, even according to the Ramban, to live in the land, and even whatever it is to live in the land and to inherit the land, etc. If it's a matter of life and death, you have to do what is best to save the people. And another important aspect is the value of the life of the Arab and the Palestinian lives. If that is something that's good for them, and it won't affect us, we have to do what's good for them as well. Now, so that's ultimately the question. What is going to save the Jewish lives in Israel? So Amon Rashef, who's a commander for Israel Security Conference, says Israel security can only be secured through parting ways with the Palestinians. Others say that regarding the question of Israel's border, so number one, the question has to be, if we're unable to defend against future military threats, then that already is a problem. Number two, can we reduce the capacity of retaliation by having those pieces of land there? Number three, by having going away from that land, will it increase the likelihood of subsequent attacks that comes afterwards? And does it invite terrorist infiltration? These are the questions that we have to ask. And if the answer to all these is that by having that land, that we are able to make sure that we're not going to be attacked, that will decrease the infiltration of terrorists, then no matter what your view is as far as conquering the land, it doesn't matter. You're talking about a land with currently over 7 million Jews, Kenai Nahara, and you have to protect them. That is the number one issue. So, when it comes to a danger, any issue that is non-pikuach nefesh, meaning anything that is irrelevant to the discussion of the safety and security of the Jewish people living in the land of Israel, that is question number one that needs to be discussed. And that is the only factor that should be a deciding factor in this matter. There's another aspect, which is an immediate danger overrides potential danger. In other words, I'll give you an extreme example. Say, for example, let's say you have a hospital. And the hospital, you say, we're able to bring in equipment that will be able to save hundreds of people down the road. But in order to do so, we're going to have to unplug the ventilators, and two patients or 5 patients are going to have to die. but will be able to save hundreds down the road. When in Jewish law, when it comes to immediate danger, it overrides potential danger. And finally, number 3, this is really important. When it comes to a question, you have to consult an expert. Take, for example, when it comes to laws of Yom Kippur. In Yom Kippur, if somebody says they have to eat, who do you consult? You consult a doctor. A doctor is the one that knows this person's health condition. If a doctor says you have to eat, then you have to eat. And the same thing is and it doesn't matter if he's a Jewish doctor or not. If a doctor says that this is what's for the health of the patient, you don't ask a rabbi. I mean, you have to ask a rabbi as well. But the rabbi will tell you have to ask the doctor. The same thing is here. You have to ask an expert. What is an expert? A military expert, a security expert. Not a political expert. Because when you're talking to when you're talking to someone that is that is in the political sphere, they may have other ideas. So when it comes to anything else, economics, you'll talk to an economic expert. Demographics, political science, public relations. But when it comes to safety and security, you have to talk to a military expert. They are the ones who understand the safety and security. This was an ad that was put in the New York Times. And it says, in turbulent world, this was in 2016, so it's a while back. In turbulent world, Israel's security chief agrees separation into 2 states is essential for Israel's security. It's interesting to point out where they say the population breakdown, they say that by 2020 it's going to be 49% Jewish. Today there's about 7 million Jews living in Israel and about 2 million Arabs living in Israel, so about 73%. But the question is if this is counting the West Bank as well. But let's read what their reasoning is. On the ad it says what their reasoning is, but we'll just take a look at a few of them. And these were all military experts at one point. One says, Amon Lipkin, he says, I'm afraid that it might come to a point in which it will be impossible to go back to a 2-state solution, and then it's going to be a chaotic situation. He doesn't exactly explain what that chaotic situation is. Shalom Mofaz says, time is not in favor of the state of Israel. The generations of the leaders today should decide. This year, next year, we have to decide. Again, it's a bit ambiguous. It doesn't exactly talk about anything that really has to do with security. So this whole ad says that it's essential for Israel's security, but doesn't exactly say how it's essential for Israel's security. Yuval Diskin says the unsolved Israel-Palestinian conflict represents an existential threat. We need to reach an agreement now before we reach the point of no return. So he says it's a threat, but again, he doesn't say what exactly their threat is. He says, Dani Yatom, who was I believe he was from the Mossad. He says, without a peace initiative, the fighting and violence will continue and our isolation process will deepen. Again, it's very unclear exactly what that is. So this may be possibly security related, but even that it is, as we pointed out, immediate versus potential danger is not addressed. We have to look at the present danger. And this is why it is so important to look at it from a simply security perspective. Whether or not it's our land, whether or not we live there, whether or not we conquered it, those are all good discussions to have. We talked about Israel being our land, we talked about it last week in our claim to the land, those are all good discussions. But that is completely irrelevant to the question on the table right now. Question on the table right now is when you have 7 million Jews living in the land of Israel, what is the safest and most secure way to go about the situation? And with that, it's irrelevant whether or not it was a land that belonged once upon a time to us, whether it's a biblical part of the land, it doesn't matter. What is the way that we are going to protect our people? This is why Rabbi Ovadia Yosef wrote to our honorable brothers residing in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. He's one of the contemporary Sephardic rabbis, probably the most known contemporary Sephardic rabbi. Wrote to our honorable brothers and sisters residing in Gaza. This was in 2003, before it was given back. Residing in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. May God be with you. May you be blessed with eternal peace. I wish to clarify my position in the matter of Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, as I have explained in the past on more than one occasion. The halachic ruling that I issued in the past regarding the permissibility of returning land for peace is no longer relevant, given the present circumstance. I had intended only and purely that ceding territory is permitted if it leads to authentic peace, one in which Jerusalem and its neighboring areas would dwell in peace and harmony. But now we see with our eyes that to the contrary, giving away territory from our holy land puts lives in danger. It is not for this peace that we have hoped and prayed. Therefore, the Oslo Agreement is null and void. I am at peace with them, but though I speak of peace, they come to wage war. We have no one to whom to rely on other than our Father in heaven. So, while it may have been done in good intentions, but nevertheless, it was very clear that that's not what happened, and it didn't come out that way. And so, unfortunately, we learned many times the hard way that this is by no means the safest way to go about the security of Israel. And now you also have one more text, which is another aspect here as well, which is 19:8. This is from the Talmud that says as follows: if Gentiles besiege Jewish cities, we do not initiate a military offense against them, nor do we desecrate the Shabbat to prepare a defense. This rule applies if the enemy's goal is solely monetary. If, however, they threaten lives, we initiate a military offense against them, and we desecrate the Shabbat if necessary. If the city abuts the border, even if the enemy does not seek to take any lives, rather they only want to plunder straw and hay, we initiate a military offensive, even if this entails desecrating the Shabbos. So the Talmud is saying that a border city, you're allowed to desecrate the Shabbos, even if they're coming just for straw and hay, because that is already a danger. And the same thing is in 19b, which is from the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. Halacha views a city alongside the border differently for fear that if the enemy conquers it, the launching pad that will allow them to conquer the entire land with greater ease. So in other words, even if right now, you could say that right now it's safe and secure to make this deal. With all that being said, if you're a border city, you still don't have that safety and security. Now take a look at Israel. This is the West Bank. Without the West Bank, Israel is 8.5 miles long from there to there. Okay? That's less than the distance of the villages. Think about that. Okay? The villages is bigger than the entire east to west border of Israel. And that is why you say, let's say that everything is right. Let's say it is even a safe and secure thing to do. It's literally, another way to put it, 2/3 of the length of Manhattan. And what they have here, they have a wall here, what they call the green line, right? That's why it's showing green. The green line is what they made. This is what Israel would look like. And how could you say, in any given way, that is a safe and secure way to make a deal, to make peace, even if they wanted to make peace? And so, this is where we have the situation at hand. So, a military, as a security expert, and the reasoning must be based on security. Okay, because there are many who will tell you that they're in the Israeli government, that they're military experts. They were in the IDF. But is the reasoning based on security? And that is the number one question. While you can ask, you can suggest all kinds of ideas, saying it's our land and have this argument. We got it, we didn't got it, we captured it, we're allowed to capture it, we didn't capture it. All those discussions are irrelevant. The question number one has to be, what is with the safety and security of 7 million Jews, Ken Yirbu, living in the land of Israel? And when that's the number one question, I could probably say that Israel should not have given away the Sinai as well. And even though people say, well, we had peace with Egypt, however, they still never had that buffer zone that they needed to protect them.
You know that right now, Israel said they want to take back that buffer zone, and you just said no.
And now, obviously.
They're not ending the war until they have it.
Okay. So there you go. Khani's the military expert. she said that Israel wants to take it back. So what, they want to take back the Sinai?
They want to take that buffer zone. Apparently there's tunnels under that Egypt.
All right. Okay, so the Rafah border crossing. But I'm saying even more, even the Sinai. But she's saying that they're not ending the war. So you could say that what's happening now, they're finally learning their lesson, and hopefully they will. But there's already talk. Well, what's going to be the day after? Do we leave? Well, so the Torah establishes the decoding principles. Currently, those principles dictate that ceding land constitutes a present danger. And should the principles change and dictate that ceding land guarantees higher present and future safety, halacha would mandate giving away land. But the fact is that it doesn't. And by the way, I'm not even talking about going into the Jewish communities, I'm going to call them communities, not settlements, in the West Bank, which there are many of them today. And they're allowing the Arab settlements to keep building while they're stopping the Jewish communities from building over there. But the truth is there's a good lesson here, and that is the Torah tells us, observe my decrees and laws for the person who obeys them and will live by them. You have to live by them. The Torah is meant to be a living Torah. A Torah that you're living by it, and not one of not one that is with no life. And this is, in general, a lesson that we could take as well from this whole discussion. Are we making our decisions based on life, based on living? Many people are looking at heroes, at Jewish heroes who have passed on, which that's a tremendous thing. But we have to look and say, we're living now in the present. What does Jewish life dictate for us now in the present? What is the best way for us to live as a Jew? Some people die as a Jew. But are we living as a Jew is the question that we have to ask. And that is ultimately what it boils down to. I'm going to read you a story. This is a story. My grandmother, Rebbetzin Rivka, blessed memory, was 18 years old. She fell ill, and the physician ordered her to eat immediately upon awakening. As she did not wish to eat before morning prayer, she began praying early in the morning, and then following this, she would eat. When her father-in-law, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, learned of this, he said to her, "A Jew must be living and strong." The Torah says regarding mitzvah, live by them. This verse can also be interpreted to mean that we must infuse our mitzvahs with life and vitality. To do so, one must be strong and joyful. He concluded, "You should not go without food. Better to eat in order to pray than to pray in order to eat." He then gave her a blessing for longevity. So what is he saying? We could talk about Israel. We could talk about the mistakes that Israel has made over time. But at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing to live as a Jew? If we're put in that position, would we have done the same thing? Well, ultimately, the question is not if we're put in that position, because we weren't. But we were put in a position where God put us today. And God is giving us a choice saying, are you doing what's important for you to live as a Jew? Or are you letting that go and letting the other forces conquer it and dictate to you of how you should be living? Ultimately, it's going to come the time of Mashiach, and until then there will be no perfection. And even if we want to live peacefully in our land, we can only do as good as we can under the current situation. But we want to be living on the land, living in a place of peace, and we hope and pray that's when it's going to be. Wait, the class is not over yet. Hopefully we could come to this point, engage in diplomacy with neighbors, aid Arabs living in Israel, and breed mutual respect. But until then, we have to do what we can to protect ourselves and to protect our land. To have a land of life, a living land. Jerusalem and the temple are very much alive in our hearts, and we eagerly await the coming of Mashiach. Now I want to end off with a video which takes us back to 1982. And you ask, what would the Lubavitcher Rebbe say? So, obviously, he's not here to say that now. But when you listen to the words that he spoke in 1982, which was the Lebanese War, the war in Lebanon was Lebanese war, the war in Lebanon, it will sound almost, you'll probably see a lot of comparisons to what's happening today. So we're going to play that now.
Israeli tanks and troops, backed by air and sea bombardment, crossed into Lebanon before dawn. The aim of the invasion was to stop attacks into Israel.
The Rebbe said you went into Lebanon himself because there was terrorism emanating from Lebanese territory.
Palestinian guerrillas struck at the northern Israeli town of Ma'alot. Of the 100 children held hostage by the guerrillas, 20 died and 70 were injured in the shootout with Israeli troops.
You also stated hostility with Syria. If need be, if you have to continue going forward, even into Syrian territory, then you should do it. And Israel should do it. It's Israel's right. You're protecting Eretz Israel, you're protecting Jews.
Wenn es aus der Hauptgeben der Linie von Levone ist gewähnt als zugegerichtet Tochter, wo es dann in der Tochter schon gewusst Israel.
President Reagan, in a letter, urged Begin to keep a cool head and not let the fighting spread. Begin replied that he hoped that President Reagan understood Israel's position to destroy the PLO military force in Lebanon once and for all.
Charles mit uns nicht durchzuführen. Wenn sie sagen, dass people Eden haben nicht, aber in der Schema, dass people Eden sein nicht Zeit. Und vielen ist eigentlich Maschinen, viele in Milchemes Morgen, nicht Milchemes Morgen an Tibusha Rotze, Milchemes Morgen von Atar, Atzene, Datsche.
It was the band before the dark, and the shooting from the left.
הייתה מלחמה מאוד מאוד מיוחדת במינה. מלחמה שבה כוחות צבא הגנה לישראל הגיעו עד ביירות ועד בכלל.
6,000 Palestinian fighters have been trapped. So thousands of civilians.
Usually the Israeli armor reached the outskirts of Beirut itself. Their aggressive, physical arm Israel.
Diese Städten sind dort in einer Masse Miluche, in einer speziellen Masse, was mit da beistehen den Israel, was hat ihn getroffen und mit Rachmon im Islam durchgefallen. 3-mal Biesiste oder 4-mal. Aber die München und die Bidochen, die Arschen Zorn, haben gesorgt mit klaren Werten. Aber mit darf gehen und machen sein, was man umgeht. Und als sie sorgen sie noch mit Mord, noch mehr starke Defizite.
הרב אמר לי, בסופו של דבר נלחמים כאן בטרוריסטים, ברוצחים שבאים להרוג, והציווי שלנו הוא להקדים.
Geht davon mit Zedek und mit Jensche und mit allen Sachen und allein sorgen, aber ich habe es letztes, weil ich Gott merke. Und Pierre Moos an den Scheichen zu selbst wie ich. Mit was hat sich vernommen, Almande schicken, Briefen und ein Reis und ich hoffe, es geschafft und die Tage zu Reis, als Pierre Moos an nicht in meinen, in die Türkei kein Ordnungsflücht, davon man nicht frei.
The Allied forces were scattered among the civilian and Arab population on the living shield principle advocated by the Soviet advisors.
International criticism of the Israeli occupation has not eased up.
The inherent right of self-defense.
2/3 of the United Nations boycotted Prime Minister Begin's defense of the Lebanon invasion.
President Reagan said today he's lost patience with the continuing bloodshed in Lebanon before another shaky effect.
Hat mir gehofft, der was darf das durchführen für Pacht und Betrieb, das hat nicht rechnen mit der Tat von der Mugelrecht und der Pardone. Aktive werden angerufen, ein Politiker oder ein Minister, der kann nicht übersehen, als der mit das Blut, also das ist die Käse, die Kuh, Messe, von der Kammer von ihnen geteilt.
The Allied stood as hesitant Israeli assault for over 2 months.
The Begin government insists all of the PLO leave Beirut and that not even a symbolic presence remain in the city. אין תבונה רבה, הוא אמר, בזה שמנהלים את המלחמה ומותירים מאחור פתח פתוח שמי שאתה מנהל נגדו את המלחמה, אתה מותיר לו את הפתח לברוח ולהיעלם ולחזור אחר כך במשנה כוח כדי לפגוע בך.
והם גלו לתוניס. וערפאת גלה יחד עם אנשיו בתוניס, הוא הקים שם את המפקדה שלו.
Hakel jeden, als Akiva Zelonarek in Beregnung und Chesed ist gleich Onkel mit den Gewänge von Dinge, weil sie haben alle Lewushi, mit alle Ski, mit alle Kehli, mit alle Klinesche, Zeitlinesche Chaos, Zeitlinesche Gold. Benehret in Jerusalem kein Tag mit Gewinn.
Israel is very fragile, very touchy from President put up on politically from those. So what I understand from is to stand against all those pressures.
Wenn am Mundheim in Jungen Bidok, wo das in die Arche Zoll, sorgen, als sie dachten sich viel, wird das eine Longweise von Schulchonor, eine Longweise von Lebensmitteln, dass sie der Ämste wird, zu einer Ämste-Schule und zu einer noch bis wann der Schule wird werden wie mir ruhig, hat mich schön, der muss schaffen, der ein Machri.
We need something more spiritual to hold you in life. And for me, it was led by Little.
לפי זיכרוני הפגישה אחת בשעתיים. ועסקנו במלחמת לבנון, ואני חושב שהיה חזון גדול. והוא לא נטש את החזון אפילו לרגע.
Er sagt, es tut weh, Gott mit dem Brennen des Musen nach der Schritte. Und dieser, der Schreiber, der nicht ist kleiner. Aber nicht der Schreiber, der das ist. Er schreibt, es tut weh. So ist da ein Kopf von dem Menschen, was hofft. Aber ich schreibe noch und noch. Und nicht nur mal Kinder, Bank, nur mit sehr keine Schämte mit so schreit, die Ärzte, das Soft der Land, und mit Einstellung der Roschmann die Priori, als zum allen nächsten Tag und nach Sorgen, wie Tochen und den Hadori Modell und der Iden und Nicht-Iden, was befindet sich im Herzen der Kind. Und man sollte bloß in der Ehe, in der Chater, mit Chemleri, mit den Bitochen der Babys, über Chemleri, Israel, Leon und Yishon.
So, just a few things. This video, by the way, is available online on YouTube, YouTube Gem. You can also go to myjli.com/survival. And as I mentioned, a lot of what we discussed is from this course, Survival of a Nation, but there's other videos, articles, etc. on there. A few more announcements. As far as now, as far as October 7th, I'll let you decide what is the best way to go about Gaza based on everything that we've discussed. Remember, this is next week, the lunch and the World War II hero, and also I want to announce that God willing.